Welcome, and thank you for coming today. This is the 2023 Deepwater Horizon Natural Resource Damage Assessment Annual Public Meeting for the Texas Trustee Implementation Group. We're very pleased to have you here. We have several projects we would like to highlight as part of this year's public meeting, including the Dickinson Bay Island 2 component of the Rookery Islands project, the Galveston Island habitat acquisition, the Sea Turtle Early Restoration Project, the McFadden Beach and Dune Project, and the Pierce Marsh Wetland Restoration Project. In addition, we will discuss planning efforts associated with the beneficial use of dredged material, which we refer to as BUDM, and our next restoration plan. First, some background information. Natural Resource Damage Assessment, or NRDA, is authorized under the Oil Pollution Act of 1990. NRDA is a legal process under the Oil Pollution Act, whereby state and federal trustees are designated to represent the public interest to ensure that natural resources injured in an oil spill are restored. The goal is to assess the impacts and determine injuries to natural resources from oil spills, such as the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, and to restore and replace ecosystem services lost while the habitat was contaminated. On April 20th, 2010, the oil drilling rig Deepwater Horizon, operating in the Macondo Prospect in the Gulf of Mexico, exploded and sank, resulting in the deaths of 11 workers. Deepwater Horizon is the largest oil spill in the history of marine oil drilling operations. Over 3 million barrels of oil flowed from the damaged Macondo well over an 87-day period before the well was finally capped on July 15, 2010. In addition to the tragic deaths, the oil spill directly and indirectly injured wildlife, habitat, and the ecosystem as a whole, all along the Gulf Coast. Recreation and recreational opportunities in the area were also negatively affected. The assessment of the Deepwater Horizon oil spill's impacts on natural resources took place from 2010 to 2015. In 2011, BP provided $1 billion for what is called early restoration. A consent decree was signed in 2016 in which BP agreed to pay $8.1 billion, including the $1 billion from the early restoration, plus up to $700 million for unknown conditions and adaptive management. Settlement payments are being made annually over 15 years. The federal and state trustees developed a programmatic restoration plan before a final settlement of the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. The final Programmatic Damage Assessment and Restoration Plan, or PDARP for short, was completed and released in early 2016. In the PDARP, all 5 Gulf states and 4 federal trustees defined the injuries caused by the spill and developed guidance for restoration efforts in the Gulf. The PDARP comprehensively evaluates the injuries to natural resources and ecosystem services, addressing the wide range of linked resources over the larger area of impact. This is a higher level planning document, not just a list of individual project proposals. The PDARP presents the trustees' findings of injury and identifies the type and amount of restoration needed to compensate the public for the impacts. The PDARP identifies 5 restoration goals: to restore and conserve habitat like wetlands, coastal, and nearshore habitats; to restore water quality through reduction of nutrient non-point source pollution, such as runoff from farms, forests, and other non-point sources; to replenish and protect living coastal and marine resources, such as birds and sea turtles; and to provide and enhance recreational opportunities. Finally, it's a foundational goal to provide monitoring, adaptive management, and administrative oversight to support restoration implementation. This is to ensure project success and to track the compensation for the damage to the natural resources. To implement the PDARP, different groups of state and federal trustees, called Trustee Implementation Groups, or TIGs for short, developed restoration plans for specific areas of focus. These restoration plans are developed consistent with the overarching Gulf ecosystem restoration goals identified in the PDARP. and evaluate projects to be implemented to restore natural resources and recreational opportunities. The TIGs then implement the projects selected in the final restoration plans, continuing to adhere to the requirements in the Oil Pollution Act, the PDART, and the individual restoration plans. Because of the scope of the damages and restoration, multiple restoration plans are released over time, and most plans identify multiple projects. This approach allows the trustees to maximize restoration, take advantage of unique opportunities, and to ensure that there is always firm documentation and guidance to refer to through this long-term restoration process. This approach also has frequent, defined milestones and opportunities for public input. The Texas TIG is responsible for planning and implementing restoration activities within the Texas restoration area. We identify, develop, and evaluate project alternatives, draft restoration plans, which we propose projects, engage the public for comment on restoration plans, and most importantly, we select and implement restoration projects and conduct monitoring and adaptive management. The Texas restoration area received an allocation of $238 million. This bar graph shows the total amount of NERDA funding allocated to each restoration goal within the Texas restoration area. The filled-in portion of the bars shows the percentages of funds the Texas TIG has already committed to restoration projects within those goals. The empty portion of the bars shows the amounts remaining for future restoration projects. The Texas TIG has committed about 62% of the $238 million for restoration and related activities. The Texas TIG has committed all funds for recreational opportunities and most of the funds for sea turtle restoration. The Texas TIG works together to implement projects in which funding has been allocated. The Texas TIG agencies include the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the United States Department of the Interior, the United States Department of Agriculture, the United States Environmental Protection Agency, the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, and the Texas General Land Office. And now we'll hear about some of the Texas TIG's restoration projects. Today we're providing an update on the status of Dickinson Bay Island 2. This is one of the 4 islands that was funded as part of the Texas Rookery Islands project. Our main partner is the Galveston Bay Foundation. Dickinson Bay Island 2 is a 4-acre rookery island constructed to support nesting water birds. Construction was completed in May of 2022. To make the island suitable for colonial nesting birds, we grew native trees and shrubs on the island and added topsoil to improve conditions for these plants. After placement of the topsoil in 2022, we noticed tremendous growth of exotic invasive Johnson grass. Our first adaptive management strategy was to treat the invasive grass with herbicide. Due to the density of the plants, the application of herbicide alone was not effective. The grass grew to be over 6 feet tall. Our next adaptive management strategy was to first mow the island using a tractor and brush shredder, and then apply herbicide. This was successful and allowed for Galveston Bay Foundation to plant more than 2,000 native trees and shrubs. Before the invasive grass was removed, there were no birds nesting. However, 2 American oystercatcher adults with a fledged chick were seen using the island. In 2023, birds began nesting on the island, and we estimated that there were nearly 4,700 breeding pairs of birds from 6 different species. We're very excited that the project has exceeded our expectations, and we're looking forward to seeing more diverse species of nesting birds on the island as the vegetation becomes more established. The Galveston Island Habitat Acquisition Project is one of the newer projects from the 2022 Texas TIG Restoration Plan number 2. This project will help conserve approximately 142 acres of unprotected wetlands and associated coastal habitat on Galveston Island near Menzel Bayou. This property to be preserved hosts a wide range of bird species, including grassland, waterfowl, birds of prey, shorebirds, neotropical migrants, and waders. Many of these bird species were directly affected by the Deepwater Horizon spill. The property also supports a diverse array of estuarine-dependent fish, shrimps, crabs, and other species. The trustees are currently working with our project partner to review due diligence information on the property in preparation for a spring 2024 closing date. After the purchase, the property will be added to an existing preserve and protected in perpetuity by means of a conservation easement. There are a number of activities that are a part of Sea Turtle Early Restoration Project implemented by the Texas Restoration Area. Some of the activities include nest detection and enhancement of the sea turtle stranding and salvage network, and enhanced fisheries bycatch enforcement. Sea turtles live in waters and nest in and along coastal beaches in Texas and Mexico. Nesting activities associated with our Sea Turtle project are conducted along the coastal beaches of Texas and Tamaulipas, Mexico. Sea turtle species that are seen in the Gulf of Mexico include Kemp's Ridley, green, loggerhead, leatherback, and hawksbill sea turtles. The photograph shows the tracks left behind by a turtle as she made her way onto the beach to nest. Activities are conducted throughout the Gulf of Mexico to search for and retrieve sea turtles that are stranded on beaches, other shorelines such as jetties, and in the water. Bycatch enforcement activities are conducted in Gulf of Mexico waters. Bycatch occurs when fishermen sometimes catch and discard fish, marine mammals, sea turtles, seabirds, and other animals that they don't want, cannot sell, or are not allowed to keep. Bycatch can include animals that become hooked or entangled in fishing gear. Texas Enhanced Fisheries Bycatch Enforcement provides funding to enhance the existing bycatch enforcement activities conducted by Texas Park and Wildlife Department, and includes patrols focusing on enforcement of Turtle Exclusion Device, or TED, regulations. In 2022, the National Park Service began construction of a base camp cabin and nesting corral on the southern end of the Padre Island National Seashore to enhance Texas nesting and hatchling protection. The cabin, which is pictured here, is almost complete. Once the National Park Service finishes the few final updates to the interior, it will provide accommodation for seasonal response personnel, supplies, and equipment. We have recently seen an increase in the number of nests in both Texas and Mexico over the past few years, albeit down from a peak in 2017. 95% of the world's Kemp's Ridley population nests in Mexico, which is why Mexico is considered to have the primary nesting colony for Kemp's Ridley, with the secondary colony being located in Texas. This secondary colony is important as a safeguard against the extinction of the species. Numbers of nests in Texas and Mexico follow similar trends. In 2022, for all species of nesting sea turtles, there were more than 17,000 registered nests in Tamaulipas, Mexico, and 284 registered nests in Texas. Nesting data is still being compiled for 2023. However, at this point, we do know that at least 314 nests have been confirmed on the Texas coast from 3 sea turtle species, Kemp's Ridley, green, and loggerhead sea turtles. The majority of the nesters were Kemp's Ridley sea turtles. In more good news, we have set a record of 51 for green sea turtles nesting on the coast this year. The photograph at the bottom of this slide depicts a sea turtle nesting corral with shade cloth and small cages around the eggs that have been relocated by Sea Turtle partner staff. The corral and cages protect the nests from predators, and the shade cloth helps to keep the sand temperatures from getting to lethal levels. The efforts to enhance nest detection and protection affect the number of hatchlings that are released. The number of hatchlings released in Texas and Mexico have also increased since 2019, with more than 1 million hatchlings released in Mexico in 2022, and nearly 21,000 hatchlings released in Texas in 2022. The goal of the Texas efforts for the sea turtle stranding portion of this project is to increase the number of live sea turtles returned to the Gulf of Mexico. Stranding activities help to enhance and expand the capacity of sea turtle partners by providing them with funding for items such as survey equipment and for extra patrols so they can better locate and rehabilitate injured and cold-stunned sea turtles. Cold stun occurs when water temperatures drop for an extended period of time below the 50 degrees Fahrenheit or 10 degrees Celsius threshold at which sea turtles begin to experience hypothermia. In 2021 and 2022, cold stunning accounted for the majority of sea turtles stranding in Texas, and there were 3 cold stun events last year in January, February, and December. In the photographs on this slide, you can see cold stunned sea turtles that have been pulled from the water and are being treated. Project partners survey beaches and patrol inshore waters to look for stranded sea turtles and to transport them to a rehabilitation facility. The chart shows the different types of injuries of sea turtles taken into the rehab facility in 2022 by partners helping to implement this project. Cold stunning accounted for the majority of sea turtles stranded in Texas, but other factors also cause stranding, including injuries due to predation, trauma, hooking and entanglement, emaciation, and a tumor-causing disease called fibropapillomatosis. Sea turtle rehabilitation partners assess, treat, and care for the stranded sea turtles, then return them to the Gulf if they're able to be released. Texas Parks and Wildlife Department law enforcement increased patrol frequency along the Texas coast to reduce sea turtle mortalities through increased compliance with TED regulations. To support the extra patrols, funds are used for personnel and equipment, vessel use, maintenance, and repair. For shrimping and fishing boats that are inspected, TED gear is measured and inspected for proper installation and use, as depicted on the photograph on the left. Texas Parks and Wildlife Department law enforcement officers reported they have seen an increase in compliance of TED use, and that likely this is due in part to continued law enforcement vessel presence in coastal waters. Texas Park and Wildlife Department law enforcement typically conducts approximately 40 inspections annually. The peak year for violations was 2018, with 7 warnings and 14 citations given out. Equipment found in violation were removed from 5 vessels in 2017 and 2 vessels in 2019. In 2022, law enforcement found relatively good rates of compliance, with 3 warnings and 2 citations given. The McFadden Beach and Dune Restoration Project includes restoring and nourishing about 17 miles of shoreline along an extremely degraded portion of the McFadden National Wildlife Refuge. The project will restore the beach and dune barrier, which protects the adjacent wetlands from the Gulf of Mexico. The adjacent wetlands, or salt bayou ecosystem, contains the largest continuous estuarine marsh complex in Texas, which includes tidal marshes, coastal grassland prairies, tidal flats, creeks, basins, and associated aquatic vegetation. This diverse array of habitat creates an extremely productive environment for fish and wildlife and provides outdoor recreation opportunities from fishing to birding. The project has completed engineering planning and design, permitting, solicitation, and debris removal. The project is currently in the construction and planting phase. We have already nourished and planted over half of the 17-mile-long project. The photograph on this slide shows a recently completed section of the beach. The project is currently on hiatus while the contractor is repairing equipment. Post-construction monitoring will begin once construction has been completed. The Texas TIG is contributing $18 million of the $94 million total budget for this project. In 2017, the Texas TIG provided funds to restore approximately 120 acres of tidal habitat in Pierce Marsh, using sediments dredged from the adjacent Gulf Intracoastal Waterway, or GIWW. The TIG partnered with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Ducks Unlimited, and the Galveston Bay Foundation to execute the project. The TIG provided funding to pay the incremental costs for the Corps of Engineers to beneficially use the sediments dredged from the GIWW to restore fish and wildlife habitat in Pierce Marsh. Incremental costs are the price difference between placing the sediment in existing upland or open water dredge material placement areas and using the sediments to restore the marsh. These costs largely include construction of the levees and the cost to pump the sediments the long distance into Pierce Marsh. This project is a component of the long-term restoration efforts to restore the 1,000-acre Pierce Marsh complex. In early 2022, contractors for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers constructed more than 9,800 linear feet of containment levees and pumped 190,000 cubic yards of sediment into the restoration site. The containment levees are needed as it takes a lot of water to move the sediments from the GIWW to the placement site. These levees and water control structures allow the sediments to dewater over time and to settle at marsh elevation. This site was constructed around an existing marsh terrace field previously constructed in Pierce Marsh. In September of 2022, Ducks Unlimited conducted elevation surveys to determine project site elevation and determine if and where additional sediments would be needed to complete the project. In December of 2023, the Corps of Engineers will pump about 138,000 cubic yards of sediment to complete the site. After the sediments are placed, the Texas TIG, Ducks Unlimited, and Galveston Bay Foundation will continue to monitor site elevation. Galveston Bay Foundation will plant the site with marsh plants as needed when the site achieves marsh elevation. Through the Restore Act, TCEQ has funded Ducks Unlimited to conduct engineering and design for additional restoration cells to complete the restoration of Pierce Marsh. In 2017, the Texas TIG funded a project named Dredge Material Planning for Wetland Restoration to identify and complete engineering and design for marsh restoration sites on the Texas coast. This project focused on beneficially using sediments from dredging projects to restore these marsh sites. This approach is termed Beneficial Use of Dredged Materials, or BUDM. BUDM has proven to be a cost-effective method of coastal marsh restoration. The Texas TIG partnered with Ducks Unlimited to execute the project. Ducks Unlimited led the Texas TIG and other stakeholders in a process that resulted in the selection of 8 sites and an additional 2 alternate sites along the Texas coast. The 8 selected sites are shown as blue arrows. The 2 alternate sites are shown by the orange arrows. Selection criteria included proximity to dredged channels, land ownership, where the state and federal lands were given a priority, and inclusion in state and local plans. After site selection, Ducks Unlimited conducted biological and elevation surveys required to complete the engineering and design specifications needed to restore the marsh at these sites. In late 2023, the Texas TIG intends to build upon this initial work and begin restoration planning. This involves drafting a restoration plan and environmental assessment for the 8 sites. This is the next step that is necessary to move toward construction implementation of these projects. Once the restoration plan and environmental assessment has been drafted, it will be made available for public input. We value your opinion and look forward to hearing from you. As always, there will be an announcement about when this plan will be available for public comment. Information about our restoration projects and other details related to the Texas TIG can be found at gulfspillrestoration.noaa.gov. Please submit any questions and comments you might have by sending them to the DWH email inbox at txdwhnrda@tpwd.texas.gov. The comment period will be open until December 8th, 2023. Please let us know your name and who you represent. This meeting will be available to watch in the future and will be posted at youtube.com/@GulfSpillRestoration. The entire Texas TIG appreciates you taking the time out of your day so that we could share with you what we've been working on. Again, more details on the information we presented can be found online at gulfspillrestoration.noaa.gov. Look for more information from us in the future, as the Texas TIG moves forward with the restoration projects. Thank you.